I've kind of talked about some of these topics in previous videos, but I want to kind of take the gloves off and talk a little deeper today. Especially since the pandemic hit, I've seen a lot of videos online, and that is super awesome. The dance community is so diverse, and like the possibilities are just endless. With this though, I really want you as a dancer to be aware of your training though. In the dance realm, honestly, almost anybody can be a dance teacher for one reason or another. And with that, I want you to be aware of who you're training for. So, with some of our videos, it may not always look pretty like right now. There's a lot of stuff that I'm working on to create more space and all of this. And so the outside view of it may look a little interesting, but my concern was more content. As many of the dancers know, if you've danced with me before in class, I am pretty detailed when it comes down to the order of how you learn things and why you do the things you do and all of that stuff. And to me, creating better content in a video realm was super important. We had been asked for a number of years to create videos, and most of my dancers know that one of my biggest concerns with videos is you don't get the entire story. And that's the same to be said about our Dance366 videos. You do not get the entire story by just watching one of those. Even in each class, you're not going to get an entire grasp on stuff because everything we do in the dance world requires much more practice, much more detailed explanation that just happens like class after class, year after year, and it takes time. So I want you to be aware when you are watching who the instructor is. I want you to be aware of the fact that like not every class is designed the same. And so you want to make sure that you're finding what is right for you. And even if that means like supporting teachers that you know how they teach and you know that like there's obviously some challenges happening, take that in consideration. But it's also concerning to me some of the stuff that I'm seeing in some of the videos that are just quite frankly not safe for dancers to be doing until they are more thoroughly prepared. And I've heard this for years, how people would come into some of our classes and tell me how they found a video demonstrating something and how they just want to do that. And I hate to break it to you, but it doesn't work that way. There's usually many steps along the way that you need to learn, and different aspects and different approaches that you need to take into consideration, really. And so I want you to really be aware of this as you move forward. And again, I've mentioned it before, teachers come in with different backgrounds. So when I say that really anybody can be a teacher, that can be for better or worse. You'll find that there are those teachers that come in with a choreography background or more of a technical background, and how they approach their teaching methods can vary. And that's an awesome way to learn. But you'll also find instructors that really probably don't know the order of progression of steps or why you're even doing the things you're doing. And so I really want you to be aware as you're filtering through all the videos online, like what you're looking at. If you're taking video classes, what you're looking at. And tomorrow I'm going to go into more detail about more of our classes and how to make them work better and all of that stuff. But for today, I really just wanted to hit the topic of awareness of what's happening in the dance community, because one of my big things is making sure that we're supporting each other in the dance community, and especially the performing arts realm. But with that also comes the awareness of what is right what is potentially wrong, what could be safe versus unsafe, and really being aware. Case in point, I'm going to use flettes as an example. I've seen a number of videos on that, and I know dancers try to just rock them out, but they take practice, and you need to make sure that an instructor is able to guide you safely through learning those. So, things to think about. I also want to talk about the fact that you'll find many studios sell like merchandise for like their studio and like different types of products you can get. And I really strongly encourage that support. We forget that dance instructors are teaching, and there are a lot of things that happen behind the scenes, and your support in purchasing merchandise, whatever that may be, helps them out. I've heard over the years the amount of people that had wanted to just be like, well, I can get it cheaper. Okay, but with that also sometimes comes the cost of you're probably going to have to be replacing certain things faster, or there's other concerns along the way in there. And I've also seen the flip side of that where some dancers have been very loyal and purchase all of their dance gear through a studio just to try to give that support. And speaking as somebody who has seen that aspect firsthand, to those of you who have been very loyal in regards to purchasing merchandise and stuff like that, I know, speaking for myself, I could never thank you enough for that, because little do you know, that really helps with so many other aspects that we need to cover in the dance studio realm and other expenses that like you don't even see. So every time you buy t-shirts or sweatshirts and stuff like that, or even if it's just merchandise like your dance shoes through a studio, behind the scenes, you're usually making someone's day, because that really helps them to grow and be able to do more than what just meets the eye. With that, I also know a number of people just kind of wait for free stuff. And again, that goes back to the fact that, like, your studio, your instructors, everyone is working really hard. And that's not always a guarantee that studios are able to just rock out free merchandise or free anything, quite frankly, because there's a lot more that goes into that. And more often than not, dance studios need to be able to have more funding in order to be able to do more awesome stuff. So kind of take that into consideration when you are looking to support your dance community. Kind of segueing from that whole purchasing of merchandise and stuff like that, I also want to talk about like your experience as a dancer. And in the dance realm, I hear so many times how dancers basically just become a number in a studio, and how really the fight is just to fill up as many students as possible in a class. And me personally, I have a hard time with that approach. I really always have. My mindset lends to the fact that I want to make sure that my dancers are always training properly and safely. And the numbers have never been something that I wanted to be a focal point. I say this because as you're looking at videos and online classes and stuff like that, I really want you to also think about being a dancer and not just a pulse with a paycheck. And I want you to take in consideration that if you see online classes, they probably have those fees set for a reason. And again, that goes back to you can't always just look for whatever's cheapest or what have you, because there's a lot of reasons as to why something may be priced the way it is. And you want to make sure that you're not just a body existing, especially when you're watching videos. I want to make sure that you're able to train properly. And not every instructor is actually able to like give you feedback as to what you're doing and stuff like that. So again, I'm going to talk a bit more extensively about how our videos are set up tomorrow, but these are things that I want you to really take into consideration moving forward. As you're watching videos, I also want you to really actively be involved. Like, even in-person classes, I've seen dancers just kind of stand there sometimes and not move. And I've also heard how dancers only want to do one aspect of dance rather than training effectively to be well-rounded in ways that we technically should be training. So I encourage you that even if you're doing video instruction or you're in a physical class, make sure that you are doing the entire instruction. If your instructor says, I want you to try something faster or slower than your comfort level, odds are there's a reason behind it. So you want to make sure that you're not like kicking back or just not trying, because it's going to change the dynamic of how you experience your classes. And like I said, that happens in video instruction or in live classes. So that's, again, something that I want you to take in consideration, being part of the entire class, not just picking your favorite parts of class and only practicing those, because you're more inclined to want to do that when you're training in a video. With that, I also want to make sure that you're not just like telling your instructor how to teach. Like, again, this goes back to my previous statement that, yeah, unfortunately, there are some teachers that probably should not be teaching, because there's a lot of safety aspects that I see fall to the wayside, or things of that nature, or especially when it comes down to youth dancers, it not being appropriate for certain age groups. And so I want you to take that into consideration too. There's a time and place for private classes, and it's always great to have your own goals going into whatever class you're doing, be it live or online. But to stand there and even like tell your instructor, if you're like emailing or whatever, I want to do this because I saw this in a video, odds are your instructor has a very detailed lesson plan. Odds are there's a reason why they haven't given you certain steps yet, and things of that nature. So if you have a question, you should never be afraid of asking, but to just command at someone, that can be a little rough. And I'm seeing some of that happen in certain videos where there is the want to do something else, but it isn't being relayed properly or respectfully. I also want to talk about the fact that, especially with online learning, but also when you are training in person, finding an instructor or a dance studio is a challenge. And again, you're going to find that there are so many options coming out in the online world. And yes, when it comes down to social media, a lot of it comes down to who's sharing what and liking and comments and stuff like that. But I also want you to be aware of dancing just because a friend might be doing it. And this kind of is a hard topic because we want to be with our friends. But I think you'll also find that you can find friends no matter where you may go. And trying to select a studio or online classes just because a friend is there is not always the right choice. I've heard a number of dancers say that the only reason they were in a certain class was because a friend was there and they knew that the training was not effective, or that they knew the training was potentially actually unsafe. And that's concerning to me. Like, I don't understand why you would pay for classes that you know are not right. And so this is something that I really want you to consider going into the new year. There are always going to be accidents or mistakes being made. That will never change. But the overall, like, understanding of what's happening in class and stuff like that, like, that should be pretty solid. And if you know that there's something wrong happening, I have a hard time understanding why people would want to be paying for a class that they know is not safe, or that they know is not actually teaching properly. So really take this into consideration moving forward. I also want to talk about the fact that and I hate to say this, but if you're like offended by certain things, like if an instructor gives a correction, or in the case of even some of our videos, where if it makes you feel that way, I'm just going to say sometimes as dancers, we need to take a good look in a mirror, and it might very well be something that is happening with you. I say this because when you're training, if there's a decent amount of kickback, you're telling the instructor what to do, you're being defiant in class, you're talking all the time, and you get called out on some of these things. If that bothers you, that's probably a cue to fix it. And I say this especially going into video classes, because I am seeing and hearing all the time how trying to find that balance of respect is really hard. And when you're doing it like live classes, making sure that if the instructor asks for you to be muted, making sure that you're actively muted. Especially with dance, you should not be eating throughout your dance class. So if you're called out and you're offended by that, odds are you need to change your behavior. Like, you should not be eating in any dance class, or being like, oh, my bad. I'm just going to do that later. If the instructor asks you to do something now, if the instructor calls you out on that, it's probably because you need to make a correction. And I'm also want to say the flip side of that is dance instructors don't set out to make your life miserable. We don't set out to try to be your worst nightmare, ever. That is never our intention. But with that comes, we need help from you as well. So I want you to think about some of that as you're taking online classes, especially because the dynamic has completely changed when you're in an online class. There are so many things to take into consideration. You may have outside distractions that really need to be minimized. And so really think long and hard about how you're training in those regards. And again, maintaining the level of respect in your dance classes. And that, like I said, I'm saying it mostly because of what I'm seeing online, but also be aware of like how you're doing in like a live class. I also want to talk about social media for a moment. If you like your instructor or your studio so much, especially since the pandemic hit, is about online and social media and stuff like that. I get a lot of PMs or DMs, whichever one you want to call them. And I've gotten emails, I've had some phone calls, and people tell me that they see the stuff we're doing and like they're loving everything. And that doesn't always get reflected online. And so I may know, but others may not. I also can see the numbers of how many people are actually watching or doing whatever, but that doesn't always relay online. And so I really strongly encourage that, again, social media support, like a comment, share, unless if there's some reason why they say you can't, sharing what's happening is like a huge thing for many in the dance community, especially because right now, again, there's a lot of companies that really just need more of that support, and liking, commenting, sharing, that's a free way to support your dance community, especially right now when I mentioned merchandise earlier and classes earlier. There are a lot of people that we know can't necessarily afford things right now because things have just been crazy this year and a lot of people are struggling. But if you're online and you can just like or comment or share, even if you don't feel comfortable being public, sending out a private message or an email and being like, hey, I'm watching your stuff and I think it's great or whatever, that at least gives feedback. And it can be encouraging, especially, like I said, when the entire dance realm and performing arts realm is really struggling right now, too. So I want this to be more of a community effort to build each other up as dancers, as the entire performing arts community. Really try to find more involvement there. And again, some of that is just whatever your comfort level is. I will see you tomorrow as we talk about progress with more of our videos. I will see you then.